Hello there, Sir from 17 once again. This is my Evilwest Evil Difficulty video walkthrough. This is Chapter 12, Lightning in a Bottle. And it starts with the awesome minecart sequence, which some might find a bit rote and uninspired, but I like the deviation of it, and I think it's way more fun than pushing minecarts and doing some of the more sundry puzzles the game has you doing. And I did mention earlier on in this project that I would have really liked to have seen a horseback level, and I think it could have worked very similar to this, just having a little bit more to engage with and to interact with. I like the idea of like the horse being on one of 3 lanes, and of course they don't have to make it look like it's lanes, because then it'll just look like you're on a horse minecart. And you could have used the movement keys to move between each lane, and then you would have just been shooting things, and it could have been avoiding like environmental navigational stuff, and then keeping up with what was going on around you, and they could have turned it into a really arcadey moment. Like, I remember when I was a kid, and in the arcades there were those like cowboy shooting games, and you had the light gun one, you know, with the live action FMVs, where you shot them and you drew the gun from the holster. That one was always really fun. Really campy and cheesy, but awesome. Everybody falls off the roofs and stuff. And then there was the one where, I forget the name of it, but you could move along the bottom of the screen, and you had your back to the player, and you had a reticle, and you were shooting people in like the distance, and it was just such a fun game. And I love like an homage to a game such as that. You might not know which one I'm talking about, and I do apologise, guys. I don't remember the name of a lot of the really, really old games I played in the arcade when I was a kid. But if you were at my age or have seen these games, you know exactly what I mean, because they were just so timeless. And speaking of timeless, so Stalkers have this feature that enables them to use the spider on their back to fire web. And if you shoot the 2 weak points, it kills the spider, so it no longer has access to it, it seems like. And that's the most important piece of information I can give you on this enemy. Oh, and additionally, he does not perma-stun from the flamethrower, so as soon as the initial stun is over, you need to be really careful, because you're going to get smacked like I did just then. Additionally, if you leave him instead of executing him, you might be able to manipulate this fight if there's any other spawns that are about to happen here. But I can't remember if any more spawns actually do happen. I think they do, yeah, there we go, right there. That werewolf. So if you keep him in that down state without executing him, I think you'll stop these werewolves from turning up, and you can just fight this monster 1v1. There are a lot of manipulations in this game when it comes to killing enemies, because a lot of enemies trigger more enemies. And if you know what you're doing, you can really turn the tide in your favour. However, I didn't end up doing it here. And it's not the end of the world, because I'm very confident in my ability to kill these monsters. But I do need to talk about the Stalkers. So Stalkers fire web at a distance, and the devs decide to put them on some roofs shooting at you. And the web that they fire, not only is it a projectile that does damage with an AoE, but it also leaves an area of movement effect. And it stays there indefinitely, it seems, until you step on it or unless you burn it with the flamethrower. And I hate it, because he's essentially just bukkake the battlefield, and when you get stuck in it, you can't move correctly. And there's an audio bug here that's happening. This can happen at any moment where these generators are present, or when you ever use a fuse, but it's the constant sound of this fuse going nuts. And if you want to fix it, guys, just restart checkpoint. Just pause the game, go to menu, continue game, and it'll respawn you, and you won't have this horrible noise. But I was playing the game at this moment on quite low volume while listening to other things when I was recording, so I couldn't hear it. So when I came to editing it, I'm sitting here thinking like, what the fuck is this noise? What was I doing? And then I saw it happen to a friend of mine on his stream, and it is indeed an audio bug. Again, guys, I'm not going to blow smoke up your ass. I'm not going to say that this game's perfect. It's not. But it's a ton of fun, and I highly recommend it. Oh, additionally too, some of the stuff you're seeing here is going to be my first exposure to the areas, so I'm going to be exploring perhaps not as confidently as I did in some of the other videos, because I haven't actually seen these zones before. This is my first time through them. And if I get lost or anything, I will edit it out, but fundamentally, if you wonder why I'm not moving through the zones with a bit more confidence, it's because I have not played this part of the game yet. But here's an environmental puzzle using electricity. I personally don't mind these puzzles too much, but I do think that they show up quite a lot. I would have liked it to not have shown up until this point and this level have it a lot, because I think it would have been a bit more special then. But we've already done this on mission 9, so it's no real surprise. This one I quite like, breaking the rocks with the dynamite. I think that's kind of cool. And a friend of my community, a guy called Khan, you might know of him if you're in the Zone of the Enders community, he came up with a tech in this game that I'd not seen anybody do, which involves throwing the dynamite into an arena before you get into it. Because when you move around ambiently, you have infinite dynamite. So if you stick the dynamite into the next fight you're about to do, and then you trigger it, when the enemies spawn, you can get a free dynamite on them. And it's quite specific as far as a tool goes, but if you want to maximize on damage, that's what you want to start doing. And it's very clever too. I don't think I would have thought to do that. But here is a fight against a bunch of werewolves. I'm going to be using cannonballs into each other, setting them on fire into some combos. There's his counter. Did you see it? You can kick that. That right there is him powering up. You never want to let that happen. When these guys turn into Duran Duran, they get really dangerous. But that's the end of the fight. And I love that fight because it's just a few enemies. This is one of the things I want to see Evilwest evolve on. I want them to have smaller skirmishes. I want them to have smaller missions too. All the missions now are 20-30 minutes long. I don't think you need that. My favourite mission in the game is From Dusk Till Dawn. Because it's like 5 minutes long, but it's intense. I love the idea of having a couple of like super brutal palate cleansing missions that don't outstay their welcome. I like a nice burst of just complete intensity and madness. That's what I want every so often, you know? It's like an album. You listen to an album, don't you? If every song on the album's 7 minutes long, it's going to feel a little bit fatiguing. But if you've got a couple of long ones, a couple of short ones, and, you know, it mixes it up every so often, it keeps you guessing. And I really appreciate that. And I appreciate it in game design as well. And I've spoke about this, and I'm going to talk about it here. This moment, pushing this minecart, I really think, because we've upgraded like our glove and stuff, I think at this moment Jesse should have been able to just thump it and it went way further. Because think about it, right? When you do pushing of an object in a game, the first few times you do it, there's a novelty to it, but after that you're kind of like, yep, I'm pushing a thing again. The best way they could have countered that expectation is that after a couple of these plot points where Jesse gets tangibly stronger, he can now push things really, really quickly, and it just absolutely decimates them. It's all about expectations and how you subvert them. Up to this point, you've pushed a lot of minecarts, and I don't think anybody's excited by pushing minecarts, especially after God of War. The original God of War, back on the PS2, Kratos moved everything really quickly, and it gave it this element of just, wow, how cool is this? That's a huge deal. It changed the game. So for a game 20 years later, to have slow-moving minecart pushing, to me, you have to go in there and make it dynamic. Like, the best thing they could have done is have you go up to a minecart, start pushing it, and then have it, like, fall through a floor. Or have it, like, fall away and trigger something and have it work and kind of be like, well, that works. Because you're expecting tedium, you know? You're expecting something that's not as fun as the other elements of the game. And if you can do that, I think it helps so much in the player's mind. You know, if a game establishes do 3 things and X will happen, the first time you do that, you're establishing the pattern, you're establishing the behavior. The second time you do that, the fatigue will set in because you'll go, oh, it's this again. I recognize it, it's not as novelty as it once was, but I don't mind doing it a second time. The third time you do it, at that point, they see beyond the smoke, they see beyond the mirrors, they see beyond the magic trick. So you have to make it do something different. And I just believe in... It's these deviations that separate good games from great games. Because you always want to be discovering something new. You always want to feel like you're on the back foot because the developers are one step ahead of you. And it's hard to do that in a lot of modern games because we've seen it all. Especially if you've played a lot of games for a long time. You walk into a room and you know what's going to happen. Some of the reviews critique this game because you can see fights before they happen. And I always find that criticism to be really funny. Because that's literally video games, you know? You play FIFA games, you see the pitch before you play football on it. What did you expect? Do you expect to see a sky dome? Do you expect to see a roller dome? Like, what did you want? You know, did you want to see a busy street filled with cars and sailors? It's fucking football. It's gonna be football. This is an action game. There's going to be fights. Like, there's a difference between wanting to subvert player expectations and constantly wanting to never have any idea what's happening. Like, what do they want, an Escher painting where you don't know where the stairs lead and half of them don't lead anywhere? Like, I don't get this idea that I walk through a zone and I see signals that I'm about to fight monsters. And people talk about how in Gears of War you would walk through an environment, listen to a cutscene, and then you'd see a bunch of chest high walls. And you'd go, oh yeah, I think I'm going to have to fight now. Is that really the game's fault? What did you want to see? No chest high walls, and then a bunch of locusts turn up and there's no cover and you get brutalized? Like, at some point, a video game has to be a video game, regardless of whether or not it affects your personal preferences at all, you know? Seeing an environment for what it is a learned behaviour. Some people will look at a room and they won't notice there's going to be a fight. They won't notice what's about to go down because they don't have that eye that you have. But you do. And of course some games hide it better than others. This game doesn't hide it at all because it's not that kind of game. This game throws a box at you that you can jump over, and the room beyond it is a massive open circle with dynamite stacks in it. Like, what else is it going to be? Some kind of mining operation? Like, there's not really much else it can be, is there? Because they've already established that you are on a roller coaster, and every stop is a fight. And that's why I like this game. You know, think about Spider-Man. Spider-Man is a game I covered recently. You might have watched it on my channel. I did no upgrades, I did no damage, I did no skills, I did no this, I did no that. I did literally nothing. And I beat the game on the hardest difficulty. I spent that entire 2-hour commentary telling you how annoying it was waiting on roofs for the fucking game to happen. Because they want you to do sundry bullshit the whole time. And when you're not doing sundry bullshit the whole time, you're playing as Mary Jane, everybody's favourite Spider-Man. You know, like, that's not a fucking game, dude, to me. That's a cutscene that 20 years ago would have been skippable, and now it's not. Now it's feature, now it's gameplay, now you're playing it, and it's shit. Like, I will take a well-telegraphed fight any day over walking around as a twat that should have been cutscene fodder, because it's not what I want. That being said, someone else might really enjoy those sequences, you know? Telltale Games players, people with diminished brain activity, I don't know. I want a game. I don't go to the cinema to read a book. I don't go to a football stadium to do jogging, you know? I want what is on the tin. And to me, when a video game is being gamey, it is achieving its sole primary directive, and that is exactly what I signed up for. And that is the reason why I will go to bat for Evilwest, because for all its flaws, it is a fucking video game. And it's just super frustrating, really, when a game gets pretty much diminished because it's doing what it set out to do. And I think that that's a bad argument for anything, fundamentally. The idea of something setting out to be something opens the doors for some weird gymnastics. For instance, when people say things like, The Last of Us Part 2 wasn't meant to be fun. It was meant to be challenging. It was meant to be uncomfortable. It was meant to be tedious and shit and boring and lame. Like, why? Why was it meant to be like that? On the one hand, when a game is meant to be like a game, I can support that. I can absolutely endorse it. But when a game is meant to be a movie, or meant to be boring, or meant to be tedious, or meant to be unenjoyable, like the No More Heroes defense, or Suda51 wanted this to be tedious. Why? What the fuck's wrong with him? Like, video games are meant to be escapism from the tedium of real life. Why do you want to bring the tedium of real life into video games? And then you get the other argument, don't you? Oh, it's art. Is it? You see, another problem with art is most of it's shit. And nobody can say it's shit because then they become pretentious bastards smelling their own farts and saying you don't get it. Like, I don't need to have a degree in like the etymology of art and design to tell you that some dude that threw some paint on a canvas looks like shit. Because there have been studies of art critics where they took children and they had children dick about with no training, just pure expression, and they made a mess, is what kids do. And it was a cool mess. I quite liked it. And then they took these art critics and had them analysing it as if it had come from a master. And they were talking about all the politics and all the like subvertive human elements and all the commentary it was doing and the post-humanism. And it's like, no, this was a 6-year-old with a tin of paint. And you're overcomplicating it because you're a bell end. And I appreciate the irony because, you know, I talk about video games on a level that people probably think is bell end tier. But it's this thing, isn't it, of I appreciate that art can be subjective. I appreciate that art is expressive and it's how does it make you feel. I think video games are art, I do. But I do think, objectively, a lot of art is shit. Because think of like the Mona Lisa. The Mona Lisa is an ugly painting, painted very well. There's a lot of theories about the Mona Lisa, and it's fascinating looking into that particular piece of work. But you know that dude that took the Mona Lisa and put a mustache on it? Regardless of how you feel about Mona Lisa, good, bad, yay, nay, putting a fucking mustache on it is not art. I'm sorry, dude. It's not art. It ain't. I don't care who you are. I don't care if you fucking Andy Warhol, Liechtenstein, anybody. You know, dude, to me, that's just garbage. Like, I would rather take piss Christ over sticking a fucking mustache on a masterwork. Because to me, that's just stupid. And I don't really want to get into the art discussion and talk about art in any true, meaningful way, because I'm not that guy. It's not my passion. It's not what I know, you know. I don't know the history of art, and I don't know too much about that. I am an artist. I love art, and I think that it's a wonderful medium. But I can't talk as an authority on any of it because I just don't know it, in spite of taking it at college and studying it for a few years. I have a very entry-level understanding of it, and people are far more educated and informed to talk about that stuff, and I'll let them do it, you know? That's what makes YouTube so amazing. But I just don't think sticking a mustache on something makes it art. And I don't care what it's meant to be, and I don't care about how you can justify it and how you can apply this reasoning to it. Logicize all you want. You stuck a mustache on something that someone else made that was better than what you made. So fuck you. And I just think it's a really bad... I think it's a bad argument when people say that it's just art, it's not meant to be understood, you know? It's just art, it's meant to be felt. And I get that. I get that in some ways, but not in this case. And that might be a dichotomy, like a strange piece of cognitive dissonance, or a double standard. You might see it as a piece of hypocrisy. You'll have to let me know if you've made it this far. But it's just one of those things, isn't it, where I don't think a video game should ever be made with the intention of annoying someone. Because that's not what I think video games should be. Yet, I Want to Be the Guy exists, and so do several troll games that are literally what I've just said. And I suppose it just comes back to the idea that it really is subjective, isn't it? It really is different strokes for different folks, and there's something out there for everyone. Which I think is really good, as I get hit by a mole, or a werewolf, or whatever that was. And it's a strange conversation, isn't it? Because the deeper you get into it, the more you realise it's a labyrinth, and there's no right direction. You've just kind of got to play it by ear and play it by gut, and pick and choose what you like. I've had a lot of people on the... I say a lot of people, this is a fucking lie. I've had like 2 people talk about this game being like God of War, Ragnarok. And I haven't played Ragnarok, so I can't talk about it. And I've been trying to avoid talking about it because I don't know anything about it. You know? I've had a lot of people asking on between YouTube and the stream if I'm going to cover Ragnarok. I've had people coming from YouTube to my stream specifically to ask about Ragnarok. And I'll repeat here what I repeated there, which is this idea of... There's a lot of people that want to tell me how long they've been with my channel. And they're asking me if I'm going to cover Ragnarok, which, if you've been with my channel, you know the answer is yes. There's no question there to somebody that's been with the channel long enough that knows what I do. if you're paying attention, you know that I play on PC now. I don't play on console anymore. And Ragnarok's not on PC. So, with a bit of deductive reasoning, you can ruminate that I'm going to cover Ragnarok when it comes to PC. And the fact that the game's been out now for like 15 days and I haven't put a single video up on it should tell you I'm not covering it right now, but I will cover it. But it seems like that is too difficult a task for some people to jump to. So instead I get some really obvious questions. And I don't particularly mind answering them, but you know when you get it a lot, when you get it several times in the space of a short amount of time, it does feel a bit tedious. But it comes from a good place, and that's why sometimes you can be a bit harsh when you shut it down. But if you're ever wondering if I'm going to cover something, if I'm going to cover it, guys, I will do it very close to its release. But I'm not going to play it unless it's on PC. You know, I don't cover Switch games. I haven't covered Bayonetta 3. Anybody that knows my channel knows that Bayonetta is one of my favourite action games, and I haven't covered it. It's not because I don't want to, it's because I can't. Which opens up the conversation of can't versus won't, which I got into an interesting discussion with somebody over on my stream once. I took the piss out of that person, and it was rather fun to do so. But the person backskated later on, which I always find interesting, because, you know, if you're going to have the balls to get into one of those conversations over pedantics, it's always better to stand your ground, or to kind of get out of there, you know, get out of there in like an intellectual sense. Like, there's nothing wrong with being wrong. There's nothing wrong with saying you're wrong. There's nothing wrong with saying sorry either, even if you don't have to. But just bouncing and like backskating it, that one I find always to be really funny. Because people think they're right, don't they? People think they're completely straight down the gun barrel, absolutely right. There's no chance that they're wrong. It's an absolute perspective. It's a dangerous perspective too, because it doesn't end well. Speaking of things that don't end well, this fight here is really interesting, and if you don't do it in an aggressive sense, it goes on forever. So this is a moment where your batteries come back naturally, so you can constantly go into the super-powered mode. And I tried to do this without using the super-powered mode, and this fight took like 10 minutes. And I didn't really want that to be in the guide, so I didn't have it in the guide at all. And I came back and recorded it, and I did it a lot quicker. And all I do is I knock all the werewolves off their side if I can, and then I kill the higher vampire really quickly. And once you do that, it's the end of the fight. And it looks really easy and really quick, but I guarantee you guys, if you don't do it like that, this fight can be massive. It's another one of those examples of the scripting being quite unusual. But thank you for watching, and you take care now.